right, folks. Hope everybody's doing good. Let's talk about one of the more interesting mountain ranges I've been in, and there's no way we can cover everything that I'm even aware of up in there in one video. So this will probably have a follow-on, or for sure have a follow-on. So the Oregon Mountains in southern New Mexico are kind of down hereabouts by Las Cruces, second largest city in the state, technically. However, it the metro area of Albuquerque is pretty huge. So there's this little mountain range called the Oregons. It's been on maps for quite some time. If you look at old maps, it's been there forever. Kind of gets moved around when the Anglos come into the region and don't quite know what's where, and so on and so forth. But it's been labeled as the Oregons or the Franklins, an extension of the Franklins, for a long, long time. And so there's Las Cruces was originally called La Rancheria or Los Rancherias. So there was sort of some farming going on by natives in Las Cruces, and more particularly the Mesilla area. And it's always been a route of travel for people going north. I've got some old land grant records from Spain that show the Camino Real going on one side of the river and the El Cobre Trail over to Santa Rita going on the other, and old smelters and lots of stuff going on here. Doniana up here was actually settled before Las Cruces. It's up here by the Doniana Mountains, which I have done a little bit of research on, and my estimation is that the Donianas are called that because of a region in southwestern Spain, actually, which is all one word, Doniana. But anyways, enough about the history. I could go on and on and on, and trust me, hopefully I will in future videos. We're here to hear about treasure stories, and these little Oregon mountains here have way more than their fair share based on their size. There is, of course, an El Chato waybill that points to the Oregons. It would have been a good place. There's cover. There's ingress and egress from two different directions. There's good springs, and there's actually metal in the mountains. There are gold and silver deposits in those mountains. There's signs of ancient occupation. There's big old giant corrals and stuff like you see kind of deeper south into Mexico in the Soledad Canyon in particular. There's other people. So Padre LaRue, maybe he was up here at what's called Spirit Springs in the north end. That's a historian, Dunham, who is more of a geologist. There's a preface in one of his Geology of the Oregons books that talks about LaRue and Dunham in the north end and his gold mine, and how the Spaniards came, the military came to get from the priest and the villagers their royal fifth, etc., and how that all went south. There's the story of Demetrio Varela, which found a mine with bullion in it when he was hiding, in a snowstorm, trying to get out of the weather. There is just unnamed stuff that you see in those mountains that's pretty interesting. Up here in the Oregon district in particular, there's also a lot of actual copper, silver, and gold mining. A lot of lead and silver came out of the Modoc and some other mountains in the area. So there's just a ton going on. If you zoom into the pass, you can actually, if your eye works right, you can actually see ancient trails cutting through these residential areas. Here's an example of that. Ancient trails cutting through residential areas coming from the pass and going up and around the Doniana Mountains and so on. Jornada del Muerto. Jornada del Muerto was not on just one side of the mountains. It was actually wherever it needed to be, or wherever your plans needed to take you. If you had a bunch of carretas and were going real slow, you take one route. If you had horses or you're on foot, you go another route. If you're trying to be sneaky, you take a particular route, versus if you had, a royal decree and a big entourage, you take a different route. So supposedly that's what El Chato preyed on, was all of, people of various types, but in particular the ones that had lots of wealth, headed either north or south. So there's also mention of the silver mines of Gorge Colon. O'Bannon is mentioned in some old prospector notes that I happen to have, and a Five Oaks mine is listed up in here in addition to some other ones. If you have been on TreasureNet or just been around folks that know this region, there's a guy, he may have passed, his name is Roger Snow, and he and his father have a lot of notes and information and maps and stuff of this region. And he talked about the Knights Templar even being up in here, which I don't know as much about. I'm a little more boots on the ground, mining kind of oriented than that. And there certainly are some interesting signs in these mountains. But nonetheless, that more ancient stuff is kind of in the lower of the region. And then there's, a bunch of things I can't tell you about that, that I know, and I'm sure I know just a fraction. So this nice little mountain range here, the Oregon Mountains, I probably lived near them for just about as long as I've lived near anywhere else. And they're pretty dramatic. They kind of rise up out of the desert. It's a compact range. White Sands Missile Range is on the other side. So, access these days isn't great, but there are just a lot of good stories and interesting stuff. You can hike in part of these mountains and take a look. And there's some beautiful views from up there. They're quite dramatic, like I said. So the hike from the flats, it's real steep, real fast. So maybe I'll do a tour of the mountains or something like that. But for now, I just wanted to introduce some of the general things that are in the mountains. So, history-wise and treasure legend-wise and stuff. So the number one is El Chato Nevarez. And maybe I should read from his waybill here just a little bit. The El Chato waybill for the Oregons is dated February 5th, 1650, although there are some various dates that pop up. It starts, plan left by Pedro Nevarez, known as El Chato. Ask for the northern pass, go towards the mountains. It is up from the river towards the right. It is 4 days' ride on horseback going at regular gait, and it is a long hill somewhat broken with some breaks here and there. It has 2 ports or doors, and one is called the Turtle and the other La Soledad, the lonely one. Before you go into this port, on the right you will find on the skirt of the hill a very thick break. So count 100 yards downward, and you will find a little clearing with little stone, and above is a blue stone rock fairly large with the mark of a cross on it, made with the chisel. So it continues on and gives some other signs and symbols and directions to look for, and some of these versions of the waybill say that you definitely started from El Paso. So El Paso del Norte, the Northern Pass, as I just started this waybill reading, that was the name of it. And, the waybills, I have some in Spanish. So translation from Spanish to English is one step that you want to try and get right. I've done my version of translation, and there are some somewhat ambiguous words because modern Spanish is not the same as ancient Spanish, and so on and so forth. So it can get a little tricky, but this English translation is a pretty good one. So it continues on, and eventually it says, in front of them there are some signs of what was left at death, so maybe graves, and on one of them is a cross. For in the midst of these breaks are to be found the mines of the Spaniard Gorge Colon. For that mine is so rich that one of his workers is full of silver. That mine has a big door made of very large poles with a lock thick and large, covered with a red rock that was put there by 25 men with levers. This door can be seen through the holes in the wall, so go carefully and follow the signs that I give. For finding this mine, many families will be helped. On opening the door of the mine, you will see many images of gold and silver, candle holders of silver, vases, plates, crucifixes, and many other things of gold and silver. Then following you will see many bars of silver and some tools. For sure signs, one walks right ahead from where I mentioned. There it is, a large corner, and the signs of the treasures that are towards the west and then towards the east. This is a copy taken from the original of that of the Keeper of the Covenant in San Agustin in the city of Mexico, signed Vicente Vasquez, 1 Jan 1861, and that's a date that I've seen, I believe, a couple of different dates on in different waybills. So this is, most of the waybill, kind of the middle part cut out, which is just a description of some of the other places to go, but describing the treasure, which seems to be a mixture of church treasure stolen and metal mined directly in the mountains there. And so if you end up ever with all of the different copies of this waybill, the stories for each of the different mountain ranges are very, very different. And so it's not like just the name of one mountain range has been transposed or something. It's more like the case that these guys were roaming all over the place looking for who they could prey on and stashing things locally and, probably selling whatever they could they needed to survive. And in El Chato's case, as what I've read indicates, he was doing it a little more out of vengeance than out of, greed or anything like that. He didn't exactly buy a big hacienda or anything. So I'm trying to think. I may have descriptions of 4 or 5 different mountain ranges where his stuff supposedly was buried, and all of them are different. And some of them come from some pretty authentic sources. Supposedly, at least one version of the waybill came from the sacking of the church over here in Doniana. And, the church was sacked, and there was in some loose papers kind of blowing in the wind. There were these waybill confessions of this bandit kind of overlord guy that haunted this region. And, the name El Chato is a nickname. That's not like a last name or something. It just means stubby or short. In his case, it is supposed to have referred to his nose, which was chopped off with the saber when he got sideways with the Spanish, living up in the pueblos further north, and that began his renegade career. There are other El Chatos. There's a bandit in later years that roamed around northern Chihuahua, and there's a Lipan or Comanche, I'm trying to remember right now, El Chato that was an Indian raider from out in the plains in West Texas. There are various El Chatos over the years, so it's just a general nickname, kind of like El Chapo Guzman or whatever. That's just an appellation. So there's not just one person that was ever named that. So anyways, his treasure was supposed to be, all that silver and stuff. So there was him. There was Padre LaRue, which was told he was in Chihuahua somewhere serving his priesthood, and was told of a mine further to the north by a dying soldier that they took in and kind of nursed for a while before he passed, and said, X amount of days north of El Paso, you'll head towards the mountains and you'll find a nice little area with a spring, and above the spring you'll find a cave where you can mine the gold, and it's quite rich. And so what's interesting is that even over the years into Anglo times, there's a couple of examples. I don't know if it was Albert Fountain himself or someone associated with all that, as well as somebody in the military that had found, so kind of Civil War days, had found gold high grade, going through the mountain passes in the Oregons. In one case, it was described as being gold shot through smoky quartz, which is interesting because there's a place in the North Oregons here where there's smoky quartz. It's quite spectacular. It's not super dark smoky quartz for sure, and there's some of that in the museum up there in Socorro. If you ever want to go see a nice museum with lots of cool local mineral specimens and stuff, head to the School of Mines in Socorro, New Mexico, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. So the Oregons have lots and lots of stories. There's all kinds of signs in those mountains, cool petroglyphs. I got a picture of an awesome turtle dolmen style thing in there. There's other dolmens and just caves and stuff. It's a very rugged range, very geologically diverse, especially in the southern portion is what I've been told. I've only been up in there a few times despite having lived near there because, there's more people, and White Sands is on the other side and all that kind of stuff. So I tend to head to the other regional mountain ranges. So Demetrio Varela's story that I mentioned earlier, he got in that cave, got some of the gold out, but then before he could go back, he was working for his boss, and they lit a stick of dynamite for whatever reason, and the blast went off too quick, and it threw a bunch of stuff in his eyes, and he went blind. And so apparently he used to sit down here in Mesilla and look up at, not look, he was blind, but, face the direction of the mountains. You can feel the sun on his face, and tell people about the mine. And some people eventually took him up there and, couldn't find it. At least that's what they said. Maybe they got rich. I don't know. Another interesting thing, just history-wise, about this area is this little place called La Cueva. Google's not really doing it justice here, 3D, but there was a hermit, a pretty famous hermit that came down from the north. He was originally from Italy, if I remember right, and he came and he lived in a cave here at La Cueva, and the villagers were worried about him down in Mesilla. Again, that was the main population area at that point in time, and so he agreed with them that he'd light a fire each night to let him know he was okay. One night he did not light a fire. People went up the next morning, found him murdered. So a little bit of a mystery. He was a penitente kind of guy, so he had like a I don't know, like like a belt with like spikes on it and some other stuff to kind of experience suffering. So that's religious devotion on a level that I hope I don't need to do. But that was something he did. He lived a real austere life, and part of the reason he left the north up by Santa Fe, up in the mountains, is that he got so popular as a curandero, a healer or whatever, that he was kind of sick of the attention. People pilgrimage basically way up into the mountains to see him, and one night he just up and left and walked clear from northern Santa Fe down to La Cueva, where he met his demise. So beautiful mountain range, really rugged in there. Really cool mix of different types of vegetation and stuff like that, and real unique little spot in southern New Mexico. And they call these mountain ranges out in the desert, a lot of times they call them sky islands, because there's a whole lot of flat between the mountain ranges. So I will get into some of this a little bit more in detail later, but I just wanted to do just a real quick one on this. I really appreciate everybody who's been watching the videos and liking and subscribing and all that stuff lately. And I should probably say something a little bit about the channel too, which is pretty much the pictures you see and the video you see, that's all me out there doing this stuff. And I try, if I get a picture from somewhere else, to give attribution. I for sure give attribution on the stories and books and references and other websites and other creators and stuff when I can. And so I just appreciate everybody's positive comments in the comment sections. I've learned quite a bit in just the short time I've been doing this from a number of people who've left really good, useful comments. And I'm kind of getting a little grumpy with not so useful comments. So try to stay positive. And if you don't like it, you don't have to watch any of this stuff. And I definitely will accept other opinions, but there's sort of a right way to go about it. And I think you folks know who you are that aren't doing it right. So what can I say? I want this to be a positive channel where everybody's having fun. So to be continued, because there's definitely more to talk about, even in just this tiny little mountain range. And I should do a better video where I dig up more maps and historical resources to show you just how long this little place has been on the map, and people have been up in there doing stuff. So hope everybody's having fun, and hope you get out there and search in whatever area you're in and have some good luck. So thank you.